Okay, and we are live. So hello, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. My name is Teresa, and I'm an advocacy associate at OLA. And this evening, I'm going to be talking to three of our really fantastic volunteers who've been helping us out recently by interviewing some Oromo refugees in Yemen and translating their stories so that we can share them, write about them, and make sure that their stories get read and are known. And so basically, what we've been doing recently, and probably for the past year, has been focusing more on Yemen in particular, because there is, it's a really difficult situation for Oromo refugees and migrants there. It's a war-torn country. There's a lot of instability. But recently, we've been focusing more on migrants. You've probably seen some of our work on the Houthi bombing of migrant detention centers and on the survivors. But recently, we've been wanting to pivot a little bit to look more into the stories of women and children and the particular challenges that they can face as refugees. And so we have with me here, I have Biftu, who's just below me on the screen. And I also have Walabuma, who's across from me, and Gudiza. And so just before I get them to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about them, I have to say that they are such impressive young people. They're at high school, except Biftu's just graduated. So, they've dedicated time whilst being at school, having, exams and everything like that, to go out of their way to help us and to share the stories of Oromo refugees. So that's something that we really wanted to also focus and celebrate a little bit today and get an insight into what their experience has been like. So I'll just get you guys to introduce yourselves, and maybe we can start with Biftu.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Biftu Adema. I am a recent graduate of public health. So I have a bachelor's degree in public health. And I am also a volunteer for OLA's education department. I'm sure some of you have seen me before. I've hosted a few live discussions. And I think this topic, particularly refugees, Oromo refugees, is one that is near and dear to my heart, and I will save why for later.
All right, and Gudiza?
Hello, everyone. I'm very excited to be here on this panel discussion. My name is Gudiza Atfa, and I am in 10th grade currently in Canada, so I'm no graduate, but I'm excited to be here and to talk more about Oromo migrants and refugees in Yemen.
And over to you, Walabuma.
Hi, I'm Walabuma Aman, and I live in Chicago. I'm a rising senior in high school. And yeah, like everyone said, I'm really excited to be doing this. And I think it's such an important thing to talk about refugees and especially women in those situations.
Great. Yeah, so, when we talk about women that are refugees, we're also talking about all of these particular challenges that they face, such as sexual violence. There's a big issue with human trafficking still. So these are really, difficult topics and some really awful situations. And, that's why it's so important that we're talking about it. But that's why it's also not an easy thing to have to delve into and to hear the stories of these women. So I imagine that's been also quite confronting at times. But before we get into that a little bit more, I thought I'd share a video just to provide a little bit of context into what that situation is really like for those refugees living it. So I'm going to share my screen with you and get it up here. There we are. So this will just be at 2 minutes.
In recent years, hundreds of Ethiopians have been flown back.
Here we go.
This squalid makeshift camp of African refugees is located in the port city of Aden, Yemen. Mother of two, Zubiba Mohammed, fled Ethiopia and now ekes out an existence here. We have been here in the camp for a year amidst dirt, rubbish, and filth. This place is not even suitable for animals, let alone humans. The local authority gave us an area of dirty land, not a camp, and we are the ones who made these tents from the remnants of the garbage. We begged some and made some others. She hoped to use Yemen as a stepping stone on her route to reach oil-rich Gulf nations, but like thousands of migrants, she became embroiled in its 7-year-old war between Houthi rebels and government forces. When we held a demonstration against the Houthis in Sana'a for a month, they told us you're not allowed to stay here. They forcibly made us ride cars and took us to a police station in the city of Dama. They took our fingerprints, photographed us, and made us sign a pledge not to return. They told us that if one of us returned to Sana'a, it would be shot dead. Nearly 6,000 migrants arrived in January alone, according to the International Organization of Migration figures, with some 85% Ethiopians and the rest Somalis. We want human rights. The sight of people being burned has never been seen before in our lifetime. What happened there made us all traumatized. Young people were burned without any sin. Their ages were only between 15 to 18 years old. In recent years, hundreds of Ethiopians have been flown back from Yemen with the International Organization for Migration IOM support, but some tried the journey once again.
Okay. So as you can see, the conditions that people are living in are, they're beyond basic. They're really not the sort of conditions that any human being should have to live in. And the kind of support that these refugees are receiving is nearly nothing. So today we want to also talk a little bit about the fact that these women have already been in Yemen for around 10 years, I think is the case with both of them, if not more. We have some that have been there for 20 years who obviously made that journey and had to leave Ethiopia originally during a time that was very unstable. And there was a lot of persecution of Oromos particular, and this is, still an ongoing issue of if they were thought to be associated in any way with the OLA or any other kind of, being anti-government in any way or form. And again, a lot of the time, these accusations had no backing, no evidence, and it was really just extrajudicial killings where you had securities coming and just killing, in fact, someone in their family home. And this has been the case for, I think, both of the women that you interviewed. And not only, that happening, but their journeys from that point were often really incredibly difficult. So I thought maybe I would get you to first just talk a little bit about how you found the experience of interviewing these women. And maybe this time we can start with Wallabuma.
Yeah, so starting off, so this is my first OLA project that I've been a part of. So it was very intimidating coming in to the project and going through it. I've always seen refugees and women, especially in those countries who have countries states. It's really important to discuss those topics and stuff. So learning about that was really important for me, and hearing those women's stories just shows you how people on the other side live, people from those countries live, and it just shows you living in America very privileged, and seeing how somebody would go from a country to a different country and even have a worse living condition. It was just a really interesting thing to discuss, and a really important thing to learn about and see firsthand, and taught about it.
So in particular, that journey that these women have had to make from Oromia, often through to Djibouti and across the channel into Yemen, and so we're talking about things like and it's really hard to avoid because there's a huge human trafficking rings are going across those areas where you basically have to pay for your movement. But, it's if you don't have enough money, you can actually, there's these modern slave markets where you essentially get sold and all of these sorts of things happening. So, and it's, it can feel so detached from our realities when we live in the countries that we do. But it's also sometimes I think it's reflecting on how easy it is for someone's life to get upended in that way, and how these women are just like they show such resilience and strength despite everything that they've had to go through. What about you, Godisa?
For me, it was really mind-boggling and heartbreaking experience, because it really shook my sense of how people live in terms of they look like normal everyday people you may see down the street or at the store. Living in the Oromo diaspora, they look like any other Oromo mom you would see as your neighbor or someone of that sort. So to see them speak so freely and so openly about their stories and not have any fear, and to be so open, and regardless of everything they've went through, and even today what they're going through, is really astonishing, and I really appreciate them for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Biftu?
For me, I think it was kind of personal, just because of the different intersections of those women that I could relate to, whether it was being Oromo, whether it was being Black, whether it was being a woman. At all three intersections, those women face difficulties. And so I found myself often being triggered by their experience and just being so angry. Like, why do we live in such a cruel world? And why is nothing or little to nothing being done to prevent these things from happening? And at the same time, like Gudisa was saying, I was also marveled at their resilience and their ability to recall their experience and, talk about it and willingly answer those questions and, give us details and etc. But I can't imagine facing the trauma that they have too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's always one of the most striking things when you talk to someone who's gone through those sorts of experiences. Particularly, I think, from reading what the stories of these women that you've shared, how they still do so much to give back to their communities, and they still really try to help other people despite all of the difficulties and the trauma that they've been through. It really is incredible. And I think it's been something that even today that I really wanted to bring out is this rallying call that we need to do more to support these women, because they really like everything that they've been through, and they are, it really is astonishing, because no one should have to go through that. But I think for women in particular, there's this expectation of caregiving, and maybe that there is this real strength there. And I know, like, I think you're completely right to touch on those intersections and even that parallel that we can still draw to what happens in other countries, in other societies. Because when we talk about Yemen, it's almost like an extreme example of all of these issues, because it's a war-torn country. There is a lot of racism towards Black people, and particularly like people from the Horn of Africa in Yemen, that goes back. It's quite a historical thing that's been there for a long time, and which really pans out and plays out in how Oromo and Ethiopian, Somali refugees are treated in Yemen, and really in particular Ethiopian refugees are treated, unfortunately. But then there's also the fact that they're women, and the way that women are treated in these sorts of societies, but also when they're in such vulnerable positions and where they can be exploited, because they often don't have any protection. They don't have anybody who's standing up for them. And so again, in both of the stories, and I really do recommend people to check out the full report and read about the stories of these women. We'll be launching the next one next month. But the experiences that they've had to go through, either themselves or their young children, of sexual exploitation is also really harrowing, and something I think, obviously I'm on the other end of the spectrum in that I don't have to encounter any of these, most of these difficulties in my life as a very white woman in Australia. But it's something to reflect on, how easily, just through virtue of where you're born, just through virtue of the experiences that you've been put through no fault of your own, that can expose you to such dehumanizing actions. And again, I know this is a really tough topic, so I want to be really conscious of that. And for you guys, when navigating it, and as such young people as well, I think as well, showing such resilience when talking to these women, and having to really see from firsthand as well, and see the from these women the rawness, possibly of their experience sharing it. And I think there was one thing in particular, a quote that struck me from, I think it's from the story that Wilabima and Gudisa shared, where there's a quote about the blood of a Black person being equal to that of mango juice, which was an incredibly, just, hearing that being proclaimed. And this, for the context, and again, this is coming out next week, so please do keep an eye out and read these stories, because they're so important. Of this woman when she went to court, I think it was her daughter who had been sexually abused by a man, and this is what was said in the court, just to give an insight into the kinds of attitudes that are present and that these women and other Oromo refugees are having to go through. How did you feel, if I could ask both Wilabima and Gudisa, when you heard that?
It's just like really saddening to hear that kind of stuff, because also like being a Black woman in America, it's also very difficult, but also like seeing it in other parts of the country and other like different countries, also like sad to see. Like it's really disrespectful to like compare somebody to an object, to like compare somebody to something so little. And it's just like, you just can't, like, it's hard for me to like even imagine how people can see people in that way.
Absolutely.
I was mind blown when I heard that, when she told us that, because it's not something that somebody can really think of on their own. It has to be something that has led up to a point where that kind of thing is acceptable. And as you mentioned before, racism there is historical between that area and the Horn of Africa. So for me, when I heard that, and in fact, the compensation for the court case wasn't against the person we interviewed, but it was for her daughter to receive compensation, and the compensation was actually mango juice. That's what it was. And to go as far as to say that, and then bring mango juice to their home and walk away as if it was nothing, their own lawyer, I didn't know what to think. I didn't know what to make of that. And it's crazy how people can act this way, and what they go through, and how easily they could even talk about it. Oh, they said this, and this, and it's extremely dehumanizing to say things like that. And I'm really happy that they don't accept things like that. They say this was said, but you don't see any form of acceptance of that idea, any form of bowing down to, yes, this is this, that our blood is worth mango juice or something of that nature. No, they said this. We are not the way they describe us, but this is the situation we are in. We want help. And so I really commend them for that. But overall, I was just, when I heard that, I didn't know what to think.
Yeah. No, and it's so true that for any form of, let's say, violence in general, be that physical violence, be it sexual violence, be it any other kind of oppression, requires dehumanization. And so, we're really seeing in these societies, and unfortunately it's something we see in our own societies as well, where these sorts of beliefs become systematic, in that people are brought up being taught to think that way, and it's handed on, and it becomes very present in institutions like the courts and governments, and that's when it becomes really dangerous. And it's something I think we should reflect on, the ways in which it can still, we can still see it in America and Canada and the US, because after having it shown to us in such an exaggerated, it seems, way, and it can seem so far away from our realities. But I think it is important to reflect on when it can be not that far away. But I think you're right that I think always going back to the strength of these women as well in being able to say it's just simply not true, and not accepting it and not internalizing it and not taking it on is another thing that I think we can really take from them, and see the ways in which, you know, in our own lives to draw strength from that as well. But I think always through the lens of really calling it out and condemning that kind of thinking. Biftu, I don't know if you have any reflections as well, either from that comment or from in the story. So Biftu worked on the story that we have in the report at the moment, which I really recommend you reading. If there was anything in particular like that stood out to you.
Yeah, so this woman who to get compensation, she had to marry at an age, and it wasn't because she wanted to, but it was in order to protect her family. So, and so in order to protect, can you hear me?
I think we might be losing you a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. In the same story, with the same woman, in a different time, she was telling us about how she had to marry her daughter off at a young age. And she did it not because she wanted to, but because she had to in order to protect her family. And so she told us about how when there are homes that it's all just women and there isn't a male figure, that they become automatic victims, that any man can come into that house and inflict any kind of sexual violence on those women, and they don't have any source of protection. And so as a way to protect herself, her daughters, married one of her daughters off, and then that man was kind of like the source of protection for them. What was frustrating to me, though, was how young that girl was, and the amount of sexual violence that she experienced prior to that relationship. And even that man didn't stay and he left and she had to marry somebody else. But what broke my heart the most was that because she was forced to be sexually active at a young age, she eventually got sick and she ended up with cervical cancer. And so it's so heartbreaking because we have this very serious illness that this young girl, she's now in her early 20s, and she, was first exposed to that kind of violence at the tender age of 10, I believe. And it was just so triggering to hear that this was all preventable. She didn't need to experience and endure that kind of trauma. And cervical cancer didn't have to be a thing for her. But because of these factors, it's just heartbreaking to hear about somebody so young, so close to my own age, having to deal with.
Absolutely. And I think it's having to confront those attitudes that people have about women and girls that enable them to engage in that sort of act. We're talking about a 10-year-old child. That is a child who's being forced into that position. And the reality of the situation where, her mother and her family didn't really have any choice in the matter because they, as you said, they had no protection. They have no one looking out for them. And unfortunately, this is where, the UNHCR and other organizations really aren't able to do very much in these situations. I think as much as they could and as much as they should to protect these sorts of children and families. And there are a lot of reasons as to why that's the case. But at the same time, it's really not good enough that that happens. And as you said, you have someone who now has a disease, who has cancer that they didn't need to have because of the way that they were treated. And because this certain mentality where people felt that they were entitled to her in that way is really shocking. And I think, again, reflecting on how all of us as individuals think about again, just generally also think about women and think about women who are in vulnerable situations, and the way that they're treated, and really thinking about what we can do to support them, the ways in which we can engage in advocacy that also really does focus on the experiences of women and children in these countries, because they are often, in some ways, some of the most vulnerable people, because they are in this position where they don't have protection. Often their husbands or other members of their family have been killed or have been targeted by government forces. And so even if those government forces weren't targeting the wives and the children as such, they're the ones that then have to live with the reality of that situation, who have to flee, who have to live without, and often in a place like Yemen or other countries where women aren't really able to work, or the kind of work that they have to engage in is very menial. It's like either physically very difficult, or the only sort of options that are given to them is in things like sexual exploitation and those sorts of avenues. And I really kind of wanted this also to be a rallying cry to really not let those women and children be forgotten, because we don't talk about them very often, and we don't hear about them in the media very often. Really, what happens to those women and to those children, and the stories are so heartbreaking. And anything that we can do, if it is talking about it, if it is writing letters, if it is creating artworks or things that really try to be a testament to those women, is important and is powerful. So I think we can probably start moving towards wrapping it up, unless there's anything else you wanted to share in particular about these stories, because I do really want to encourage people to read them, and I want to encourage people to do that so that they can hear the stories of these women more from their own voices, because that's something, that's why it's been so helpful and important to have our young volunteers with us, because they can talk to them in Afan Oromo, they can hear them in their own language and share their stories. And I think that's something that's really important as well. It's not just us telling their stories for them, but really trying to let them tell their stories, because as we've heard here today, these are incredibly strong and resilient women who are able to talk about what they've gone through and are able to retain a sense of who they are and what their worth is. And I think it's really important that people get that sense from their stories as well. But I'd like to go around and hear any last thoughts, whether this is something that you felt is valuable to you in your life going forward, having had this opportunity, and whether it's something you think you would want to keep on doing and why. And yeah, any sort of thoughts like that.
So I just wanted to say that this organization is super important. Everybody listening or watching, please go read those articles, because listening and reading from people who experience this stuff firsthand is so important, and it'll just make more people in those situations take the opportunity to speak up on those topics. And just educating more people just makes more people talk about it, which gives everybody an idea of what's going on, so we can try to stop it, or make those situations better for everybody. So I just think what Ola's doing, everything, it's really important, and it's it's the first step to changing what's going on.
Yeah, I are super important, because sometimes when we hear we go of hundreds of people, even something.
I think you're breaking up again, at least on my end.
Yeah.
Okay. Can you guys hear me?
A bit better? Hello? Okay, it looks like Biftu's unfortunately, her internet is not staying with us very well. Maybe while we wait to see if her connection gets better, we can go to Gudisa.
Yeah. As last remarks, what I want to say is just that it's crucial for us to listen to these stories and read these stories, because it's not, as even though it may be us writing these stories, it's them telling these stories. And one of the people we interviewed, when asked what she wants to come out of this interview, or what she wants going forward, from the international community, just to help people in her situation and people like her, she said she wants the world to stand with them, and for the Oromo people specifically to stand with their refugees who are in Yemen, who are suffering. And in order for us to stand with them, we have to know their stories and know who they are. And in order to do that, please read these stories, understand, and we can all come together and take action. Take action. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks, Gudisa. And yes, I think Willabumi, you might be working. No, go.
I'm really sorry about that. But what I was saying was that I think it's really important to tell these personal stories, just because when we hear about it in terms of like hundreds of people died or thousands of people died, it's really easy for us to kind of distance ourselves. But to hear about personal stories, and especially being the person that is doing the interviewing and talking to them, you have a name, you have a face, and it becomes more real, and it really puts it into perspective. And it's a lot easier to sympathize and empathize with that person and be like, okay, I hear you and I see you, and this is a real person that's actually going through this situation, and not just numbers. And so what I would say is, yes, definitely read the stories. I don't mean to diminish the importance of, recognizing how many people are going through this and these stories, but I'd also say get involved. You can join OLA, you can join other organizations, or you can donate to organizations that are assisting refugees. There are definitely multiple ways that you can get involved, and I think that people should do that.
Great, thank you. And yes, I mean, definitely I would really encourage everybody to read and to share the stories if they can as well, because as everyone said, I think it is really important to tell the stories, to share them, and to connect with them. And I think that's why today, I didn't want to talk too much about stats, but to really have this time to share a little bit about these women's stories, and to emphasize the fact that they are real people and complex people. And that, we need to sometimes remember that they can't be simplified down to that experience that they have, but that, all of the complexities of what it means to be a woman, to be a person, to be a child living through that experience, it's something that I think it's really important that we connect to. And so I do really encourage people where they can to support any sort of initiatives that can assist these women, support OLA, because it's really hard when we don't have enough resources and people to do as much as we would like to help these women and to help any of the Oromo refugees and migrants that are there. And there are a lot. We have people that have been there for 20 years. We have young migrants that have been arriving, that are still arriving, and are really going through horrific experiences where they're stuck in a war-torn country but going home back to Ethiopia is not a possibility for them, or would be just as dangerous. And they have often no one to turn to, no one who is there to listen to them and to listen to their stories. And that's what we're trying to do here today. And that's why we're writing these articles. It's why we're having these panels. We're trying to do what we can to make sure that each of these individuals, or as many as we can, get a chance to share their story and get a chance to be remembered and to be thought of, because that's something that we all deserve, and particularly we deserve when we have gone through such trauma and such difficult experiences. And to remember that they're not reduced to that. These are people that are full of life and full of heart and full of incredible, an incredible capacity to give in their lives. And that's something that as much as possible we should be supporting. So a really big thank you to Biftu, to Wolabuma, to Gudisa for joining us and for all of the time that they are giving us. It's so appreciated and it's such an incredible thing. And I really encourage everyone to take a leaf out of their books. Gudisa is 15 years old and he's such an eloquent young man. And Biftu and Wolabuma are incredible young women. And it's so amazing to see what they can contribute. And I think it's something that we could all reflect on and see what we can be doing as well. So a massive thank you to you all.
Thank you all as well.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everyone. And don't forget to read the article, to like this, to share it, but more importantly, to share the article, to share it on Instagram, wherever you can, and get these stories out there. All right. Till next time.
Galatoma.